Okay, well, hey, let's get things kicked off. Thank you so much
Awesome.
for being here. We were so excited you could join us for our 98th
Episode 98.
episode 98. Yeah, and I'm really excited to introduce Randle Lee. I've
Cool.
known Randall. Our kids have went to school since they were itty bitty.
Hmm.
Golly, 4 or 5. When did your daughter start at
She
Crossroads?
started when she was 3.
3. Okay, so they've been the whole time because they started in pre-K, Mother's Day out. I think, yeah, they did Mother's Day out at the Belle Isle. What didn't she?
Yes.
So yeah, so they went to school together all through. Both graduated the same time. His daughter's up in Kansas. My son's still here in Oklahoma, but have a lot of fond things to say about him and his wife. They're wonderful people. But not in addition to that, Randall has spent the last 30 years in the nonprofit world. And he's done that. I'll let him talk a little bit more about what that is, but he's done everything from working with chambers, running chambers of commerce, working actually with nonprofits, being part of that. He's worked. This is kind of cool. He's worked in the fundraising side, but he's also worked in the political side. So I think there's a lot of really cool things that he can come to share with us. But the thing we want to talk about today, and this is really specifically why I wanted Randall to come, is we've been getting, everybody keeps asking, and we talk about it a lot, but about how do I
Always
get my
comes
board
up.
members
Yep.
motivated? How do I
Yep.
get them engaged? How do I get them to moving? And then
Yep.
how do I find good board members?
Yep.
Now, last week we talked about how to connect with people, just creating relationships and doing this. And if you missed it, please go back. If you haven't, go to our YouTube page. We'll put a link in when we send this, put it back to it, about how to connect with people. I think there's a lot of really good practical information. But Randall, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks,
And,
Randall. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I
Thank everybody
appreciate
for
the
coming.
invitation. Absolutely.
Fun.
Well, I just want to just start off, and I'm just going to just throw some questions at you, Randall, and see what you think. But what do you think about whenever somebody says, "Well, how do I get my board members motivated?" I saw you laugh whenever I said that. So why don't you just kind of just tell us a little bit about what your thoughts on boards and the overall picture.
Now, and I will put the disclaimer out there that a lot of this is either what I've gained through actual schooling, but a vast majority of it, as most of your folks on this call, I think, learn by doing. And I am a kinetic learner, so that helps even more. But I think over the time that I've been involved in working with boards of directors, the technology's changed, for one thing. I think the expectations of organizations have changed, but also there has been very little change in the not-for-profit world from the standpoint of training for that. And anything I say is not meant to disparage anyone else or any organization at all, anywhere. I'm just saying that I think that as we're starting to see some of the retiring folks in not-for-profit and the younger folks coming in, they have a little bit more grasp of some of the technology. I think that one important issue that I've learned, while I very much am a rah kind of person, if you will, I enjoy being excited and get excited. I think you've got to look at board motivation in a very scientific way. So I'm not quite so sure it's an exciting thing to do, but you've got to spend some time in developing many arenas besides just the strategic plan. So I think that my experience has told me that there's a lot of time spent dealing with just intricacies of a not-for-profit, as opposed to just going out and raising money or creating a board that's engaged. And the number one item, I think well, maybe this is 1 and 1B. 1A and 1B is really look for people with connection to whatever you're doing. Now, I know sometimes if it's like the Automobile Dealers Association, if you're not an automobile dealer, you're probably not going to get too excited about that, but they're probably not going to ask you to be on the board either. So be very diligent and thorough in creating a board matrix. And I may be jumping around a little bit Jason, but
That's good. That's
hopefully
good.
I'll answer the question. You can tell me to shut up whenever. But I think that a board matrix is very important. So working with the board to say, who do we want on our board? It could be a diversity and inclusion addition that you want to make sure that you're aware of as you look at board members, but it may be, who has a connection to the disease or to the cause,
right,
who has a connection to whatever we're trying to fundraise for. And I think that that's as important as, or more important in today's world, where in the past it was, who do we know that has money and who do they know that has money? Now,
I want to stop you just for a second.
Okay.
I want to just do something.
That was
for
great.
those of us
that
don't have that experience. Just when you say a board matrix, tell us what that means.
I
mean, I really
Sure.
want to make sure everybody
understands. Yeah, and there are templates out there that you can find that are for free. Or you can build one in Excel, or I have several that I'd be glad to provide at some time.
Oh well, hey,
as a model,
what we'll do is we'll hold you up to that.
Steal that.
And we'll share it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The recording. Yeah,
absolutely. And it basically lays out who's on your board now and what are the traits that you wish to have in a board member, or what you need in a board member. Could be, Trevor, that yes, they have money. That could be one big check mark that you do, but it could be, well, we've got 15 attorneys on our board. Do we need 15 attorneys? Yeah. Maybe we want somebody that has a little different outlook on a particular cause. So we want to make sure that they're covered within that. And because a lot of times in the not-for-profit world, everything's just so go, 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 go. You really don't have time to sit down in some cases and review who you want on the board, even though that's a very important item. And many not-for-profit people will be fired because they haven't done that. They've allowed their boards to kind of develop themselves and motivate themselves because they're not prepared to do that. And what I mean by that is, in the matrix, you're going to have, here are the items we'd like to have in our board. Number one, it could be they may have a faith background, or they may have certain kinds of business background, or they may have a different outlook. They may be an entrepreneur that you want that kind of attitude on your board, whether it's in that industry or not. It gives you an idea of who you should be addressing or building in your network to make your networking more efficient and effective. You can look at different organizations and either become a member, or you probably know somebody that's a member of that organization, to attend some of their meetings and make sure you have that board matrix. So along with knowing your mission and your vision very well and motivating the board would be making sure you have board members that know why they're there.
Hey, I want to just, by show of hands, who here has a board matrix? Does anybody? It's okay if you don't, or if you know.
Yeah, most don't.
So that's what I was going to say. I don't think that most do. And I think it's so important that you start talking about who do we want, because that way you can go start talking to, in your going, it's not just randomly trying to grab people to say yes. Because I think, if you're reaching out to somebody, and let's say somebody is in the accounting, they're a CPA. Okay. I'm just making this up. Mm-hmm. But let's just say that because you don't have somebody, and you go reach out to somebody and you say, hey, John, would you be willing, we'd really like to talk to you about serving on our board. We need somebody with your background experience. Sure. Don't you think that lends to that whenever you're being very specific, to that person, that they understand what they can contribute? Because I think that helps. I think when somebody knows that I'm being asked because of my profession, my expertise, what I can bring to the table, that means something to them, rather than just random shot out there that, hey, we need 18 people on our board and we're short.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also important, Jason, that you bring that up, because I feel very strongly that you don't need a big board, and most bylaws are written to where they should say up to a number, as opposed to should contain. Because I have never, even though many of the organizations I've worked for have an up to number in the organizational documents, we never got to that point. We always held back a few places in case we ran into someone that was not on our radar. But I'd go back to the point of the matrix. It also helps you really craft a targeted, pinpoint, drilled down message for that person. So while they know they're approaching me because I'm an accountant, well, why is that important to our organization? And here's the steps laid out. So your messaging becomes very succinct and very direct. And it's not really an ask. It's more of a consultation. We need your consultation help, as opposed to would you like to be on our board, or could we invite you to be on our board because of X certain reason? So that, and then I think very much so written job descriptions for the board members for the various areas that, and that's nothing new. So a matrix that is for your pre-board, I guess, if you will, and then the job description is on board when they decide they would like to come on board, because you know, a lot of the things that I've seen in 30 years is because we try to do it on a personal level instead of a third person level. And by that, I mean, how can we use another organization, or how can we use another set of information tools to validate what we're doing, as opposed to, we would like to invite you to be on the board. Well, our organization has this mission and vision. And by the way, here's how other states are doing it, or here's what we've done in the past. So creating that job description, here's what we would be asking you to do, and make it very, very specific. I've seen job descriptions of, you're going to chair the fundraising committee and you need to raise $300,000 this year. Okay, that's not really a job description, but
right.
No, but I think
that marching orders.
I think that's the thing is, if you don't have expectations, if you don't give somebody expectations, if you don't map that out, then they come on and you're more likely to fail.
Yeah,
and I think one of the other things that, you know, we talked about this on a podcast the other day about when you write stuff down, how it tends to happen.
Accountability, for sure.
So, you know, the accountability of it and everything. So, you know, it seems to me that just a step, if you're trying to figure out how to develop you know, your board and doing that, before you start making calls and before you start doing it, which I'm a big advocate of creating relationships, is to get those job descriptions, get that board matrix put together. So then you can do that. So I got one question. You mentioned about, you think smaller is better than bigger. What do you think what board size do you think is that you've seen, experienced, that was really good, functional?
13.
13?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 13 to 15 is what I've seen. If you get much over 15, then it becomes very difficult to engage board members. And then subsequently, if you get it too small, then it's also easier for one person to take over a board meeting, because there's less people to interrupt them.
Good call.
Would you talk about that for just a little bit? Maybe some experience you've had, seen that, and how that can go sideways, because I've seen that happen where you've got a board, you know, and that's why I always advocate for term limits, because I've seen board members absolutely dominate a group. Everybody goes, everything has great, and the one person goes, yeah, I don't think that's going to work here. And I mean, everybody clams up and okay.
Yeah, because they have certain standing in the community or in an organization. Yeah, and trust me, the reason and the way I got to a board matrix and to the job descriptions was just as you mentioned. We tended to look at who has the money. Well, those people are being asked by 20 different boards to be on the board. So knowing who you need to talk to and having that job description eliminates some of that. I'll go back to the third party. You know, if somebody else is saying it, then it's probably true. But if I provide a job description for our organization, I'm going to also show you a couple from another organization as well to say, see, there's not a lot of difference in what we're doing, but we do need to make sure that you're aware that these are the expectations. Now, obviously, you're going to have more people in the pipeline than just those people you ask, because you'll have those people that turn you down. But I noticed, I think one of the items that you had discussed or were discussing at one time was not waiting till somebody's term is up before they find somebody, and board succession. And I think it's a third step in the process is having a person in waiting for whatever chairmanship that you have. So if you have a fundraising chair, then they're going to have a co-chair. That co-chair will be a vice chair 1 year, sit and watch and help. And then that next year they will be the chair. Because we as organizations, and again, I've done this. That's why I know it so well. We tend to get laser focused on here's somebody that follows through, that makes good on their promises. We want them to be the chair and their chair for 65 years. And so then there's an ownership that's built up, goes back to your term limit comment.
Mm-hmm.
There's an ownership that's built up that don't tell me what to do, son. I've been here for 30 years on this board and I know what we're doing and I know how to do it. And you've been here 5 years.
Anybody else have any experience like that?
It's a people thing. Yeah.
Anybody? I that's good. I'm glad you don't.
I've
had some, and it's palpable. It's like, whoa, the temperature in this room just changed.
Slow your roll.
I had a volunteer that they gave him a key to the back door of a chamber that I was working in. He had a little bit of free time, was pretty involved in the community, but in order to let everybody know he was there, he would start whistling when he'd unlock the back door. That was just not a good time of the day because he was very tough to work with. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that I failed in saying, well, this guy knows everybody. He's got a lot of contacts. He's obviously done well with other organizations. He needs to be on our board. Not even for the credibility's sake. It was just simple the fact of the connections that he had. Well, in reality, most of the boards didn't like him either. And he was on it based on his position within a company more so than his personal contributions to whatever organizations there were. So that did not end up well. So, really taking the emotion out of that. And I know that you can't do that and use the word motivate because motivation is an emotion, I think.
Sure.
But a part of that is communicating the right message to motivate. And you do that by making sure stuff is documented.
Well, I think what I hear you're saying, Randle, is that you can give all the rah-rah speeches you want and you can bring somebody in to talk and get them all fired up and do all that kind of stuff. But until you get the foundation laid and the pieces put in place to set the right expectations, it doesn't matter because it's always going to fall as far as that is. And if it's not there, then it's not going to hold up. Mm-hmm. So it's really getting those foundations.
Takes time and effort. Obviously, you got to be disciplined with those things.
Well, we're talking, we always bring things to fundraising. Here's one that I have, and we talked about this briefly the other day. What do you think about having a requirement for a board to either give or get? In other words, either they give it $10,000, they write a check for $10,000, or they raise $10,000 to be a member of the board.
Well, now that I don't agree with. There is an organization that I formerly worked for that has now changed, where if you'll pay $25,000, you can have a seat on the board. That sends in my opinion, a terribly wrong message to everybody else. And while I could raise $25,000, they automatically have somewhat of an advantage if they can just write a check, because I obviously would have to spend the time to do that. And in most cases, people fall off if they've got to raise money just to be on the board. Now, what they've done, which is, I think, just as bad, they've taken the final say-so over the committee work and put it with a group that if you spend $10,000, you can be a member of. So in actuality, if I'm on a committee of this organization, they're not going to tell me. Actually, I know it because I know the organization, but you can't make you can't do any work in that committee. So I could be a member of that committee, but then that work moves to this other group that paid $10,000 a person to be there. I think in some cases that they may have a wrong motivation for being able to pay that too. So while I appreciate the give or get, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it,
It sets an interesting precedent, that's for sure.
Well, it does, and I've not ever been an advocate or not an advocate for it. I just my always thing is, board. There's they have two of the functions they have is governance and raise money, and I think having them thinking that I want them to be involved and understand what that is, because sometimes they go, oh well, that's not my thing, and I'm like, well, yeah, it is. You've got to be engaged in it, be a part of it. But
well, I think Jason too is if you fold it into other items, for example, say the giver gets $5,000 and a table at your gala is $2,000. So they buy a table. Well, that $2,000 goes toward their giver get. So that it's not just, it's the participation as much as it is the writing of the check.
Sure. And that's why I'm asking those questions. I'm, because I don't have a firm stance. I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, because I've been part of organizations where it was the person who had the biggest checkbook made all the rules. And I don't think that was it was very manipulative. I saw it manipulated. Whenever he wanted it to do something for his agenda, he did that. And I don't think that's healthy for a nonprofit. I don't think it's, I think about things in 5, 10, 20 years and what that's going to do to the organization. Are you going to be better off because of it or not? And so, is the mission are we still going to be able to serve our mission because of this or not? And so that's why I'm asking the question. So, but from your perspective, you think it sets a bad precedent?
I think I probably fall more in line with you. I'm not against it. I'm not necessarily for it. I think that you just have to be careful.
Yeah,
and
I
not
think that's really good. That's good experience.
and not just rely on the fact that they've got to give or get. I think I go back to Jason, if they don't have a connection, it's going to be difficult. I mean, they may just write a check because they're not engaged, and they may have the money, but if you don't have a good messaging for that person, then it may only be one-time check, as opposed to you might get a consistent relationship with them that ultimately may lead to a board position. So you don't want to cut that off. But I think that the fact that who you've got on your board because of your board matrix, you've got people that understand what their job is through your job descriptions, you're using third-party materials. And then I very much believe that we as not-for-profit people have become a little bit more sophisticated in the sense of, not just because I'm on here today, but using outside experts. I'll even use the third-party tool again. I don't know as much as you guys know about fundraising. And so I think what we're now seeing is the realization of the return on investment idea, more so than we're not going to hire HGA because they cost money, which people I have found, unfortunately, they may be the greatest business people in the world, but when they walk into a boardroom of a not-for-profit,
they change.
They get tired and
their personalities change. Yes.
Yeah.
And then with that, well, you mentioned colors. And so with that, I'll kind of close this loop by
stripes, whatever.
Yeah. Well,
That's what I mean.
I always like to use, and I've got a copy of it too, a communication style test. It's not a personality test. It's how do you communicate? Because what I found that we as not-for-profit leaders have to understand how that person we're sitting across communicates. So, I've taught leadership development from the standpoint of fundraising by going into the person's office. And you can tell a lot about how somebody communicates by looking around their office. Now, I look at Trevor's office. I can't see a lot of it, but, look at that plant. It's alive. Probably not plastic, because I know him. It might be. But anyway, he's not. There's things you can tell about how somebody communicates.
Sure.
And if he's a thinker, and I'm a doer, which means that I'm just everywhere and I just want to get things done. And I go into his office and try to raise $5,000. And I just say, we need your help. This is the greatest thing ever. Will you write us a check? And he's a thinker. He doesn't have enough information yet. And so we, as the not-for-profit person, take offense and say, well, he's not even interested in what we're doing. So let's scratch him off. And in reality, You've not even, you haven't understand that person across the table from you and how they communicate. And if you can communicate like a thinker does, even though you might be a doer, it's difficult, but it can be done, and it'll save you a lot of time and energy and re-explanation of things, I believe.
That was explained to me a long time ago, Randall. It was that was the analytical, right? The person that needed time to look at things, the analytical, I guess you would call it, communicative or personality.